everybody to GLOBEBUSTErs.
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Welcome to GLOBEBUSTERS. Had to switch it up real quick. So cool. So we have a good show for you today. This is episode 6 of season 10, Michelson-Morley experiments, often referred to as the most famous failed experiment in history. Should be a good one. I want to make sure that everyone really gets it. I think it's one of the most important aspects of this alternative cosmology discussion, and it is grossly misrepresented and misunderstood within the mainstream and even within this community. So hopefully we can bring some clarity to it, and you will then understand how this test actually falsified the heliocentric model and the belief that we move around the sun. So that sounds like a bold statement, but it is assuredly the case. All right, cool. So we'll go ahead and introduce the panel. Before I do that, I want to show you guys that if you just look at the screen here, you'll see it. We have a new place that you can donate, as opposed to YouTube and or Rockfin taking 30%. This place does not take nearly that much. It's ko-fi.com/globebusters. That's ko-fi.com/globebusters. The link to donate is pinned at the top of the chat, and the link is the first in the description. We will read those out. It'll pop up with a notification on the stream. In fact, I'll show you whenever someone donates. It'll do that right there. Let us know. And there's also a membership option that you can sign up to support the GLOBEBUSTERS monthly, effectively like a Patreon, but not Patreon and not YouTube memberships. And of course, also signing up underneath GLOBEBUSTERS on Rockfin helps not only GLOBEBUSTERS, but all other content creators over there that are big on free speech. So we strongly encourage you guys to also follow us, subscribe to GLOBEBUSTERS on Rockfin, so that we can have free speech still be alive. So now that we got that out of the way, so you guys know where to donate during the stream, I'll go ahead and introduce the panel. So first up, we have my boy Zack from Good Times for All. How's it going, my brother?
Hey, Austin, doing great, man. Doing great. Not a bad weekend. Or not a bad week, I should say. Spring's in the air. Supposedly groundhog saw his shadow, so we don't have 6 more weeks of spring, and yeah, it's supposed to be coming early. It's about garden time pretty soon here. It's so weird gardening down here in South Carolina compared to northern Indiana. Like, I can start planting some of the root stuff here pretty soon, where in Indiana we didn't do anything until May. So it's just, yeah, it's totally different, but yeah, excited. I'm loving it.
Nice, man. Yeah, I can't relate. It's felt pretty amazing consistently for the last few weeks here, so I'm pretty blessed. But yeah, dude, you guys are about to get around to it, and an animal saw or didn't see their shadow. That's insane. All right. Also, we have my homies on the show again this week. This is in their wheelhouse, the subject. So I thought, what better people to bring on? So we first have my boy Alan from Space Audits. What's going on, my brother?
Yo, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it. This is a great subject, and I'm glad I can be here to, help share and give people the information to decipher it. Because it's one of the coolest experiments that they ever tried to do to prove heliocentrism that didn't work out for them. So,
yeah, I agree, man. And thanks for jumping on, bro. If you don't know, that is, of course, Alan from Space Audits. That's on YouTube, Space Audits. I will add both of the guests' links in the description. I encourage you guys to go follow them, show them some love, and also catch up with them over at Ether Cosmology. Speaking of, the owner of Ether Cosmology is also here. That's my boy Toby. What's going on, brother?
So much for having me on again. Like Alan said, this is a really important topic, and I don't think we're ever really going to be able to stop talking about it. unfortunately, maybe fortunately, because we're waking people up from the fact of the spell of relativity. But I have a feeling there's like a new wave of gaslighting response coming to this on like a whole new level. I saw like a couple of YouTube videos that were pretty well edited and actually understood our points that were very heavy on the gaslighting department. So I think I'm going to have to do a response to those videos at some point soon. And we're going to have to like really, really go hard on this subject, I think.
Yeah. I agree.
I love the
man.
job that you guys do over there. If anybody is interested in, really getting into the technicals and stuff like that about it, I know when we had these guys on last time, I had trouble following a lot of the stuff they were saying. This is the advanced stuff right here, but they're really nice guys. Go hang out in their chats and ask them some questions. They're real nice guys. It's not like hanging out at a troll thing or anything like that. So yeah, go in there, ask questions. Hopefully, they can help you out to start understanding it, because this is one of those nail in the coffins that's been around for a long time. But because a lot of the words that are used in this type of physics are so big and, people have trouble understanding them, they've been able to hide it for this long by not even teaching it to common people like us. So we really need to grasp this concept, and the guys we have on panel right now is a great asset to have. So take advantage of it. Yeah, start going over to their chats. It's almost every night you guys are chatting, right?
Yeah, there's usually people in there most nights for sure. There's usually people there that can definitely answer your questions. I would say pretty much every night. Yeah. But it's not really a guarantee. It is dead every now and then around there. But yeah, this is the type of thing where it doesn't have to be so complicated. It's only complicated because of their explanation of it. But really it's just like you combine this with Ares failure and, it's really simple stuff. It's just that the propaganda is really strong is kind of what it comes down to, in my opinion.
Yeah, being able to see through the lies, that's part of the trick. But you guys do it so well, and the way you explain it is just
yeah, sorry.
awesome.
I don't mean to say that it's it's not like, oh, it's easy, everyone should understand it first time they listen. I do not mean that at all. And actually, the other thought that I had is that sorry to interrupt you, but if you are feeling overwhelmed by this stuff, like just know that 100% I was definitely there at one point, and don't be frustrated or discouraged. Just try and figure out as much as you can, and then ask questions. Yeah, like it was mentioned, if you come over their Ether Cosmology Discord server, we can definitely try and answer your questions there, or we can point you to some resources that can help, or over on Miswits, or really any of the Telegram channels. I'm sure somewhere on Jeran's channel could help you too, or whatever. But yeah, it's something that we're all learning together. Don't feel like there's a dumb question or anything like that.
Yeah, well said.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, if you want to donate to the stream, it's on the screen. It's in the description. It's pinned on the YouTube chat. That's ko-fi.com/globebusters. And also, if you cannot donate to the stream, there are other ways that you can support us get through censorship, etc., which is liking, sharing, and subscribing. And as cliche as it sounds, because you hear so many content creators say that is the truth. So I just now edited the description. It has Ether Cosmology and Alan's links in there, and I'll also update it to get Toby's in just a moment. Go subscribe to them on YouTube. I mean, it's completely free, and they put out incredibly good information. Speaking of, let's also shout out No Longer on the Ball in the chat is dropping some of the Ether Cosmology links and Space Oddity links on his True Earth wiki page, which is very cool, very good resource. So check that out. Links in the description. And yeah, I just strongly encourage everyone to go subscribe to these people. I'm actually going to start the show by playing a video from someone else that I would love for you guys to go subscribe to. and that is Robot Polisher. You guys probably know his videos. Not everyone can be a robot polisher. Everyone's heard it, and everyone's seen his videos circulate. He makes very good videos. I cannot believe he only has a few hundred followers, just like Ether Cosmology only has 500 subs. Alan only has just over 1,000. These were pretty unacceptable numbers based on the quality of content. So I would strongly encourage everyone to watch it, go support. And I will, again, just type in Robot Polisher, and then you'll find his video. So I'm going to play a video that's about this subject. It's actually me in the middle of like a kind of intense conversation to start it. So it's a little bit like, it almost sounds a bit aggressive, but without the context. But I also want to point out that we had this discussion on quote unquote X, which is formerly known as Twitter, on Flat Earth Fridays. And so we discussed this subject on Flat Earth Fridays, many hours of content. And I know that there are things that are being clipped up and chopped up, and that was recorded as well. So you guys should definitely, if you're on X, go keep up with Flat Earth Fridays. That's every Friday night. And we had very extensive discussions about this as well. And Alan and Toby are typically there also. So we're trying to basically take over the different platforms and show that when the door's wide open to anyone to come in and try to defend the globe, they can't. They literally can't. They get absolutely dunked on by this core group of people that are constantly researching. And so you should support the people that are on the front lines is basically what I'm saying. And whether that be by sharing, liking, subscribing, and even financially, you guys should definitely support it. Thank you for the $5 super chat on YouTube, 100. Let's talk about Aries success. I'm definitely cool with integrating Aries success, mischaracterized as Aries failure. And I can toss that over to Toby and Alan in a bit, and we'll talk about that as well, because this is basically what this is about, how heliocentrism was debunked. And it's important to understand this, and I will say this. Any group of people within this community trying to tell you not to talk about this, not to research it, that it doesn't matter, that it's a parlor trick, that it's not a real experiment, that don't look into it, it doesn't matter, I'm going to respectfully disagree with that take. I think it's quite the opposite. It's one of the most important parts of this discussion, and that's why we keep talking about it. Dujeka Literna, I can't say your name, but thank you for the donation. We'll read off all the donations on Ko-fi periodically throughout the stream.
Big shout out to Justin Johnson, gifted 5 memberships.
Exactly,
Thank
yes.
you, sir.
Shout out to you, Justin Johnson. Thank you for gifting the memberships. You guys get the special little emojis there. And I will also say this. I set it up where if you go to Ko-fi, there are also 5 different tiers of memberships there. So you can also sign up for memberships there. And then I'm going to talk to everyone and figure out what can we do to kind of throw some perks your way, and maybe have some GLOBEBUSTERS merch and some like exclusive content and behind the scenes peeks and stuff like that. Yeah.
Over on Rockfin, Fishhead, Montana, tip $10. YouTube chat, come to Rockfin and support free speech instead of the Matrix. Be a part of the solution. Thank you, Fishhead, Montana.
Yeah, and while we're doing that, let's go ahead and read Ko-fi out. So thank you for the tips. Keep spreading Adonai's word so that all humans realize the lie of heliocentrism. Thank you. I'm going to call you Dujay. But it says like Dujekaliterna.
Yeah, it's working. I saw it go up as it went onto the YouTube there. I saw it do its thing.
It's cool, yeah.
And I couldn't pronounce that one right off the bat real quick either. I had to like spell it out. But thank you so much. So obviously, if you donate through Ko-fi, you get the advantage of it actually popping up on the screen. Dakota Dunn signed up for level 4 GLOBEBUSTERS, so tier 4, level 4 GLOBEBUSTERS. Thank you so much, Dakota, the first Ko-fi member of the GLOBEBUSTERS. So welcome to the GLOBEBUSTERS, man. Yeah, very, very generous. Much love, man. Thanks so much. And we're gonna make sure that we hook you guys up with some perks. I'm doing the same with my channel, and trying to ensure that we don't have to rely upon some of these big tech companies. Okay, so let's go ahead and move into the show, and then we'll keep up to date with everyone supporting. Thank you to everyone that has already supported.
And I'm going to play this video. It's like 10 minutes long, but if anyone has anything that they want to say to jump in, I think it's pretty well edited. It kind of shows you some of the mental gymnastics people are doing on the other side. And we're going to get into that. And we found out that we thought this would be, once laid out, the information just so undeniable, would be easy concession for anyone that does believe in this globe model. They'd have to start conceding to exactly what happened, and they're not doing that. They're not doing that. And that should be very telling. If you can't just accept what happened for what really happened, right, then why? Okay? And it's because it has very serious implications, and that's why we're really hammering down on it, because it's incredibly important. So, cool. I'm going to go ahead and pop over here to the full screen and then try to pop up the video. There we go. So you guys, let me know if you can't hear it over here in Skype, and I think everything should be good for the audience as well. So let's watch it. Like I said, if you guys have anything you want to say, just jump in and I'll pause it and then we'll talk about it.
Sounds good.
Cool. Let's do it. Reading through all these PDFs and these, like, this forbidden science that's being hidden, and we're figuring out the true nature of where we are, and we're hoping to inspire the younger generations and kind of give them whatever we've been able to find, so they're able to keep looking into the truth of where we live. We're going to have a new generation of people that think for themselves. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's just over, I guess. The debate's just over now.
Okay,
And so it sucks
the
because I had to put my glasses on and pretend to be a baller because you guys can't defend it. I thought Flyers was stupid. I thought Flyers was dying.
Nobody's ever bothering to actually talk about
Real science.
Dude,
The
what?
audacity.
That
Oh,
was
is it not done?
awesome.
No, it's done. It's done.
Oh, dude, that was amazing.
I know, right?
Robot Polisher, the channel.
Yeah, right here, Robot Polisher.
I
go
have
show-
not seen that yet. That was quite an edit, man. Holy cow.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome. But all of his videos are like that caliber. Here, I'm dropping his link.
Oh, I messed it up. He had 777 subscribers. So
we want to
broke
mess it
that.
up. We want to mess it up.
I know. Let's
We're,
mess that
we're
thing
dropping
up.
the
We'll
link to that
Jump it
video.
up to 7,777.
Yeah,
There
at
you
least,
go.
man. That dude is crushing, bro. So,
Yeah, amazing.
and I think it did tie right in with what you were saying, right? Which is, once the conversation starts getting broken down, you see what they do? They just start gaslighting you. Like, they just resort to gaslighting you.
Dude, the part where he put together all the different people saying that it's word salad and we're people who study physics, and you obviously don't then. Not these types of physics. I mean, saying I study physics, that's a very broad, statement. But the stuff you're using and the words that you're saying, in the order that you're saying them is coherent. I know it is. I know what these words mean. And to say you study physics, but Austin uses words I don't understand is a ridiculous statement to make. Then you go and look up the word and you learn what it means. That's what, every physicist throughout all of time has had to do, is go and study a topic and learn the vocabulary for that topic. To say he's just using word salad because I don't understand the words is nonsense.
Yeah, that was hilarious. And he, like, the part where he edited it, I mean, that whole edit was so good. It, like, told a story. The way it, like, started with kind of the debate going back and forth, and then them asserting word salad and them exposing that they just don't understand what you said. Like, they literally just don't get it. Like, they literally all went through and said that they didn't get it. And then they had the edit of the one guy, shout out Peter. He's talking about word salad, and he literally gives an explicit example of something that's specifically not word salad. It's like, it's just hilarious, man. That video cracked me up.
It is so telling, man. So telling.
And then the perfect follow-up with JT, right? Like, JT just laying it out. Like, man, I didn't get it right off the bat. I had to, I actually thought he was, full of it or something. And then months later, I came back after I had been doing my own research and, like, wow, what do you know? Like, this is all making sense. Holy cow. Like, this makes sense of this experiment now. And yeah, it's, if you have questions about something, if you think someone's making up words, then, you need to ask. Maybe you're misunderstanding why they're using the word. You should probably ask what they meant by which specific word.
Yeah, they never indicate what word is he's making up or doesn't make sense. They all have the same answer. Oh, it's just incoherent word salad. They love saying that.
Yeah, when you ask them specifics, they don't have one. I mean, by the way, I mean, that video used my interactions as an example, but it's not exclusive to me, right? I've heard just the other day, Alan was breaking down GPS, and this guy just basically accused him of word salad. Now, he didn't say it. He just said that it was a bunch of like babble.
A bunch of gobbledygook.
Yeah, gobbledygook. Yeah. And it's like, what, bro? You guys are devolving, right? Shout out to my boy Adam. Thank you for the $25 donation over on Ko-fi, brother. Much love, guys. I'm happy to support. I look forward to Flat Earth Fridays, Globebusters, and all of the awesome content every week. Awesome, man. Thank you.
Adam.
Thank you so much for the support. And as you guys
Big
can
shout
see,
out. Oh, sorry.
I can pop up the donations from those screens on here. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's cool. That is awesome, man. Ko-fi. I've never heard of Ko-fi.
Yeah, it's cool. Alan showed it to me.
Big shout out to Tony Coriolis over on Rockfin. $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. Always
Dude,
support.
I respect that you're committing to Ko-fi.
Yeah, we're all in, baby.
There's a coffee cup next to it, bro.
But dude, if you go to their actual website and their actual YouTube channel, they all call it Ko-fi.
Really?
Yes.
All right, now I'm thoroughly confused. Okay.
Yeah, me too, because I clearly want to say coffee, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you called it Ko-fi at first, I was like, is he
Dude, their
kidding me?
whole YouTube, all their employees, their websites, if you get to read out loud, it literally says Ko-fi, like even the Texas
I see what happened. What's happening, bro? They're trying to punk us. It's definitely coffee.
Well, okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing about saying it Ko-fi is it's spelled really goofy, right? So if you say Ko-fi, no one's going to know how to spell what you just said. So they're going to have to ask how to spell it, which is exactly what you want when it's spelled Ko-fi.
Exactly. If you say coffee, then they're going to go find the other place that basically offers a donation service that's literally called Buy Me a Coffee. Right. And
Yep. Or go to coffee.com, like literally, and I don't know what that even is.
Yep. Because I was so confused, I went and watched what all I could do, and these people kept saying it, and it's super triggering, but it is what it is. They've been pretty cool so far. And like I said, you can sign up.
Yeah, they're great.
You can sign up for tiers. Now, they did make me agree to terms and service of whatever platform that I'm using. So whatever platform I'm using that's connected to the donations coming in, because like, say you connect it to the YouTube chat, oh, that's what we're going to do too. I'll do that right now. It'll pop up in the YouTube chat and say, so-and-so donated, right, to the stream. It'll actually put it in your chat. And so, like, while you're streaming it's basically saying, like, while you're streaming to YouTube, adhere to YouTube's guidelines. And that's just like this cover. It's like a cover that they have, right? It's the same thing that used to be with the company we use for the summits. I mean, we talked reckless on the summits, though. So they're not actually going to directly censor, I wouldn't imagine. But it is what it is. There's another alternative I have in the cut. These people aren't going to stop it. They're not going to stop the sauce. Okay.
Big shout out to Yuppie Dirtbag over on Rockfin for the $5 super chat. Thank you. I like that Yuppie Dirtbag.
Nice. Thank you. All right. And again, go show some love to Robot Polisher. Just type in Robot Polisher, links in the description to that video. Dude's
amazing edits, dude.
Yeah, and I think if you can get a lot of good feedback and support, I think he does have like 17K on Twitter, but everywhere else is really small. It'll inspire him to make more and more and more. Right? I'm very impressed with the amount of time it takes to go through all those long duration format, and then pick out the good part. So, all right, shout out to him, and let's get into the subject. And that did kind of cover it as well. It's just, of course, why we cover it while we played it. I'm going to show you this other depiction of Michelson-Morley. And if you saw my stream, we did kind of cover this, but the Globers came in and derailed it, so this would be much more efficient. So if we come over here to Firefox. Okay, this is the depiction of Michelson-Morley effectively. It's an interferometer. That's how an interferometer works. So you have the light beam that shot out, and then it's split right here in the middle, and then it goes orthogonal, basically perpendicular to each other. So there's a beam splitter right here. It splits the beam into two. Then it comes and bounces off this mirror while that one goes over to the perpendicular direction, bouncing off that mirror. They then come back and recombine in the middle. And then they go over here to the receiver. Right, and so here's another depiction of it. You shoot out a light beam, you split it so that you can guarantee that it's in the same phase because it was the same light beam, right? So it's waving all together. It bounces off of one mirror. In the other direction, it bounces off the mirror. They then come to the center, and then they start to overlap as they go to the receiver. Now, if everything was completely stationary, the light beam should come back in perfect unison, and you wouldn't have that DNA-looking symbol there. Right, like right there, you see how you can have it not really be separated, and then you can also have more of an interference pattern. Okay, so the fact that it's separate here looks kind of like what they say DNA looks like. It means that one of the light beams is getting to the receiver slower than the other one. Logically speaking, that would mean, if you assume that the speed of light was constant, was that light beam had to travel a further distance. Right? Because speed equals distance over time. And so if they're getting there at different times, well then why? Is the distance changing or is the speed changing? Okay, and so long story short, it's a good way to detect motion. If an object's moving, it'll cause one of the light beams to have to move in a longer path. It'll get there after the other one. That'll start intersecting. You can then measure the fringe shift, and you can see how fast the object was moving. Absolutely ingenious invention. And this is what Michelson-Morley did. Okay, so you understand the basics.
Beautifully thought out, you know. As far as determining whether something is doing something or not, I mean, this is top of the line right here. Genius, quite simple, but this takes it to a whole new level right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and to point out, the principles that this interferometer was built on was from Fazal and Fresnel, who did the Fresnel drag coefficient experiment, where where Fazal split sunlight in translation or in moving water, like the interferometer beams had tubes had moving water through it, where the light would go with and against the water, and they used that to measure the fringe shift pattern to derive the proportional relationship to even measure velocity in the first place, right? So they were able to measure the translational speed of the water moving through the tube with respect to the speed of light. So they knew when they came to Michelson-Morley, right? Like, they knew exactly what they were doing. They had sound fundamental principles of how to utilize the wavelengths of light to measure motion.
Boom. Yeah, and of course, here's a depiction of what they claim the Earth is: a ball that's tilted, spinning, revolving around the sun. The idea is, if you use an interferometer, right, one of the light beams is going to be moving in the direction that the Earth is moving, one's going to be moving against it. So now it's supposedly going 1 degree a day, roughly, just under, right? Because the circle is 360 degrees, then you have 365 days, which means it's moving 1 degree a day right at it, as opposed to the claimed rotation, which is 15 degrees per hour. So that means that you're going to need a very sensitive device to detect 1 degree per day. That's roughly 30 kilometers a second is what they claim the Earth is moving through space. The reason everyone was so impressed with Michelson-Morley's setup was because it was sensitive enough to detect the assumed Earth's orbit. It was over 10 times more sensitive than it needed to be. And like I said in that video, to quote Einstein, should have been decisive. And actually what I should do is show you guys that as well. I should show you guys just Einstein saying it right now. We'll just get straight to the chase here. And I hope that's making sense. If the Earth is supposedly curving around the sun, that's a curved path. It's technically a rotation. See, people now just repeat this phrase: orbit is different from rotation. How so? How so? Because if an object is moving around a center axis, that means it's rotating around it. That's what rotation means. Okay. Now they do say that rotation in orbit's different, well, because it's obviously two different phenomena in their model, and they ended up having to change the definition of it. Now, just to show you that this is Einstein's paper, Relativity, Special and General Theory. In here, he says, in one of the most notable of these attempts, and these attempts is referring to all attempts here to detect the motion of the Earth. So he's saying all attempts to detect the motion of the Earth in terrestrial experiments, whether or not that motion can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments, all of those attempts have led to a negative result. And before the theory of relativity, it was difficult to reconcile to it. So in one of the most notable of those attempts to detect the motion of the Earth, that was negative, Michelson devised a method which appears as though it must be decisive. So when someone says, oh, it wasn't sensitive enough to detect it or whatever, like they don't understand that it was over 10 times more sensitive than it needed to be.
Yeah, and your highlight up there was really perfect too, that how you had highlighted the word one page up more. You had highlighted the word question and then motion of the Earth. And so there you go. Like that was the question, was the motion of the Earth.
Exactly.
So just that's for when you're, talking to those people that say Einstein didn't even talk about that when he talked about relativity or whatever. Here it is. He's talking about it. And the question was specifically the motion of the Earth, not is there an ether. So, yeah, very good highlights there.
Yeah, exactly. So the question was, can the motion of the Earth be detected on the Earth, right? When you come down here, this is where it describes it. So he starts to describe the actual setup of the test, which we can look at in just a second. That's the video that I was showing.
I think they would have kept the ether if they could have, but they couldn't. It wasn't like Einstein was directly trying to get rid of the ether. They had to get rid of the ether for the globe model to work.
Yep.
It wasn't there. They didn't have some vendetta against the ether. It was well-established physics at that time, that there was an ether. And that was the only course of action they had to take to keep the lie going, was to do away with that.
Yep. And then once you get that lie out there, suddenly everything else has to start. Well, yeah, I mean, just the lie of our motion is what it all starts with, right? And then in order to defend that lie, they had to wrap all of physics around that lie. And now, we're into this insanity about, virtual photons and things that are just, detectable but unexplainable, dark matter and infinite expansion and everything.
Yeah, it's all a cascading effect.
Back to that initial deception.
Exactly. And like the video I played was for many reasons. One of them is what they resort to in response to this. Just use basic logic here. If what you believe in is true, then all information about it should be openly welcomed, should be embraced. Supposedly what you believe is true. You should never want to tactically omit or misrepresent stuff that happened, because truth doesn't fear investigation. I know it's a very simple principle, but people should really pay attention. If you apply pattern recognition, that is a great way to start to find truth, is to sift through the lies because of tactics like that. So here he describes the layout, right, of the Michelson-Morley test that should have been decisive. He said, imagine two mirrors arranged on a rigid body that the reflecting surfaces face each other. And that's what we just showed you the visualization of. A ray of light requires a perfectly definite time to pass from one mirror to the other and back again, right? So we know how long it takes the light to go from the mirror and then back. We know exactly how long it takes. And then if the whole system was at rest, we would know that that's how long it takes the light to get there and back. Because everything else is at rest. Like I told you when we looked at the depiction over here, that actually, when I looked at this right here, this setup here, when you get this interference pattern here, well, if everything was at rest, you wouldn't get that, right? So, okay, hopefully you guys are following along here. And so he points out, where are we at here? Would be at rest in respect to an ether. It is found by calculation, however, that a slightly different time is required for this process if the body, together with the mirrors, be moving relatively to the ether. Now, even if you take the ether out, this is true. If there's movement, then one light beam is going to take longer to get to the receiver than the other one. It's very simple logic, right? If the light beam is going out and back, but then something's moving underneath it, well, then now the thing that's actually going to measure that light that's attached to, say, the earth that's moving underneath it is going to be displaced from the light, right? It's like the idea of if you
travel a longer path than
exactly
the other light.
Exactly. If you had a hot air balloon and then the earth was spinning under in reality, right? We know what would actually happen. There would be displacement.
So when they set it up, they probably set it up so everything's perfect, right? So the two light beams, as they're setting up their measurements and everything because I was thinking about how you would do this, how perfect it would have to be, the measurements to each, reflector and things like that. So you would make sure that it's not in motion and set it up so when it gets to the collector that they're both perfect in unison, right? And then you know that your distances to your mirrors are correct.
Right, and then the number one way that they made sure that they're perfectly in line is they just shoot one single beam out and then split it. Because say you had two beams, sources of light.
Yeah, that's so smart.
Exactly, it's brilliant. If you shot those two beams out and tried to sync them up, there's no way to ensure that they're exactly in sync. But if you just shoot one and then split it, well, then you know that they're in sync. They were the same light beam shot at the exact same time from the same exact source, right? That way...
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, the collector plate there, when it's not in motion, it'll look like, go back to the one you had. Yeah, it'll look just like that. See how it started off as just it looks like one snake? That's what it'll look like when it gets back to the collector plate.
Exactly. If there was no movement, it would look like this the whole time. It would come back as one single line. The fact it looks like this DNA here shows that one of the light had to travel a greater distance or went at a different speed than the other one, right?
Yep.
So
beautiful. Such a perfect test right there.
I mean, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Imagine like someone just coming up with that back then. It's a brilliant test. So then what he points out here is that if there was a motion, then it would be different. There would be a slightly different time, right? And yet another point is shown by calculation that for a given velocity with reference to ether, this time is different when the body is moving perpendicularly to the planes of the mirrors, from that resulting when the motion is parallel to these planes. Meaning that and it makes sense, obviously, that like if there's a perpendicular path, right, in relation to the motion, it's going to be different. It's like swimming with the stream or swimming against the stream. It's like running in the direction of orbit or running in perpendicular to the direction of orbit. It's just like what the globe model claims happens with Coriolis. The Earth spins underneath it. So depending on if you're shooting east to west or north to south, you either are or are not going to have the alleged Coriolis effect. It's exactly the same thing in that sense. It's direction specific. And you're going to see a difference if one of them is perpendicular to the other. Now, this is Einstein himself explaining the test and why it should have been, what did he call it? Decisive. Right here, decisive. Okay. So, although the estimated difference between these two times is exceedingly small, and he's again referring to the time difference right here. I should have highlighted better. I should go back. Right? He's referencing up here where it says it'll be a different time. Right? The ray of light requires a perfectly definite time if it's at rest, but it's found that there would be a slightly different time if the body was moving. And it says that specifically there'd be a different time based on which direction, right? In relation to the motion. Okay. Although the estimated difference between these times is exceedingly small, why is that? Again, because the Earth is supposedly orbiting 30 kilometers a second, but that's only 1 degree per day. So the difference wouldn't be very great in how short of a time the light has to take to get back to the receiver, right? Light is incredibly fast. Of course, I would say that light doesn't actually physically travel. It's just the illumination rate that we quantify, assuming it physically travels, but it doesn't matter. We do know that that's a very reliable measurement. It's very precise, it's very fast, and it helps you very precisely measure motion. So with all that being said, there should be a difference in the time, even though it was small, right? So although the estimated difference between these two times is exceedingly small, Michelson and Morley performed an experiment involving interference, which is, of course, that's what this pattern here that looks like DNA is. It's called an interference pattern because they're interfering with each other, right? They're intersecting. Involving interference in which this difference should have been clearly detectable. Anyone trying to defend the heliocentric model now and say, oh, it wouldn't have been able to detect it, don't understand the test. Okay, the person that came in and saved the heliocentric model because of the test specifically explains how that's not true, and we don't need him to. You can just understand the sensitivity of the interferometer. It's just a fact. It's just evidence that can't be disputed. It's weird that people would, again, need to misrepresent this, right? So it should have been clearly detectable, which is why I pulled this up. The experiment gave a negative result. What better way than to let Einstein himself tell us what happened? The experiment gave a negative result, even though there should have been a difference in the time that should have been clearly detectable because the Earth was moving in relation to the apparatus and the light beams, but the result was negative, which was very perplexing to physicists. So what happened was they came up with this ingenious test, and everyone basically celebrated. They just immediately celebrated because it was such an ingenious way to test it. They were finally like, wow, we finally got the technology needed so we can get more precise measurements and figure out more about what's going on, about the velocity of light in relation to the motion of the Earth. They're like, yay, we figured it out. But then it was negative out of the blue, and that is not what they expected. So that was very perplexing to them. So Lorentz and Fitzgerald rescued the theory from this difficulty by assuming that the motion of the body relative to the ether produces a contraction of the body in the direction of motion, that the apparatus itself contracted, bro. Just in the amount of contraction being just sufficient to compensate for the difference in time mentioned above. So Lorentz and Fitzgerald proposed the idea that the apparatus contracted just that small little, exceedingly small amount, just the right amount to make it look like the Earth wasn't moving in relation to the light. That's what Lorentz and Fitzgerald said, and they said, well, it's the ether doing it, right? So he saved them from this difficulty. What difficulty? That it was a negative result. It didn't detect the motion of the Earth. So he then says, comparison with the discussion of section 12 shows that from the standpoint also of the theory of relativity, this solution of the difficulty was the right one. What was their solution to the difficulty? Rescued the theory from this difficulty by assuming that the body contracts in the direction of motion. So people also say, no, relativity has nothing to do with Michelson-Morley. You didn't need to invoke length contraction to explain Michelson-Morley with relativity, blah, blah, blah. Both of those are incorrect. So there we go. We broke that down a bit.
It sounds like relativity is based on that.
It is a fundamental portion of it for sure. And so cool. And then we're gonna kind of breeze through this part here. And this is what I wanted to show you guys. So when you talk to people, what's the mainstream say? Michelson-Morley just disproved the ether. Everyone thought there was an ether, but Michelson-Morley disproved the ether. So if you talk to a heliocentric person, you can take a screenshot of these if you haven't seen it yet. I did it on Skull and Globers. We did it on Flat Earth Fridays, but I'm really trying to drive this in. Did Michelson-Morley debunk the ether? They'll say, yes, of course, that's what it did. Is all that's needed to explain Michelson-Morley from within a heliocentric framework the removal of an ether? They'll be like, yeah, you just get rid of the ether, then it's no big deal. Because if there was an ether, we should have detected it. That's incorrect. Okay? And then so you explain, just like I did in that video, can we use an interferometer to detect the motion of an object moving in a curved path? An object rotating or moving, you can detect that moving object, right, that's moving in a curved path with the interferometer, and we just explained how. And it says, can this be done without an ether? Well, the GLOBE model claims that we use interferometers to detect the rotation of the Earth, that object that moves in a curved path, right? And they also claim there is no ether. So, of course, the answer has to be yes. So with all that said, is the Earth moving in a curved path around the sun? Right? Like, seems simple enough if I'm going to come back over here. Of course it is. This is what they say the Earth is doing right here. Right? So it's moving in a curved path around the sun. That's what they claim. Okay, so if that's the case, then wouldn't an interferometer be able to detect the movement of that object in a curved path, just like you guys claim it does for the rotation? Just like we can prove it does, by the way. You can prove an interferometer will, of course, detect an object moving in a curved path. You can put an interferometer on another object that's moving and see that it'll measure it. So we know for a fact that this is what happens. Okay? And so, can that be done without an ether? Well, they would have to say yes. We would have to agree. It doesn't matter if you have an ether or not, right? The light is going to be displaced if there's a curving object. It doesn't matter if there's an ether or not. And so then would removing the ether alone explain the results of Michelson-Morley? And the answer has to be no. So if you take someone through this, if someone's watched MC Looney Tunes, FTFE, Professor Dave, Simon Dan McKeegan, they've listened to any of these anti-flat earthers in modern day debates, or on Discord, or went and read Wikipedia, or hit piece articles, or if you Google it, Michelson-Morley, all of those unreliable sources are going to tell you that all that Michelson-Morley did was disprove the ether. All you have to do to explain Michelson-Morley is to get rid of the ether. They thought there was an ether. MMX showed there wasn't an ether. That's all it was about. Had nothing to do with the motion of the Earth. That's incorrect. Just like we read Einstein, where your boy Toby pointed out that the question was whether or not you could detect the motion of the Earth. The name of the paper, which is right here, The Relative Motion of the Earth in the Luminiferous Ether. It absolutely is about the motion of the Earth.
Yeah, and the ether. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious in the title.
I would think so. Yeah, and so
how could they say it's got nothing to do with that stuff?
It's insane.
I don't know
right?
how you guys do
what,
it.
What I asked them, the quickest way.
I'd get infuriated.
Yeah, it is infuriating. The quickest way to is be like, okay, then what did they use to get their prediction of fringe shift? They had a predicted value of interference, a fringe shift. What did they use to get that prediction? Yeah, it's just, I mean, they used the alleged speed of Earth. So then the answer is no. Would removing the ether alone explain the results of Michelson-Morley? No. You just established that an interferometer is going to detect the motion of an object in a curved path with or without an ether, according to their own model, because they claim to use ring laser gyros to detect the rotation of the Earth with a Sagnac effect and Michelson-Gale-Pearson. Now, I do want to also explain this to you guys. So I realize a lot of people don't know the difference in these two things. So let me pop this up. So if you have what we just showed here with his like orthogonal or perpendicular interference with the interferometer, in the MMX, Michelson-Gale-Pearson is basically a giant circle underground, and then you have the assumed rotation of the Earth in a certain direction, right, east to west, is what we see the sidereal rotation as, and they of course claim that the Earth is spinning to the east. And so if you shoot out a light beam in one direction around this closed loop, this giant circle, and then you shoot another light beam out through the circle in the opposite direction, one's going to go with the motion of the Earth, one's going to go against it. They're going to come back and intersect. They're going to give you an interference pattern based on the displacement of the rotation of the Earth. You're going to be able to measure how quick the Earth is supposedly rotating with that interference pattern. That's the difference in the two, right? Is that one has the orthogonal, because in a small little like picked out piece of the orbit, then you're not going to be able to detect a full rotation. It would take a full year, right? But then you have the rotation of the Earth supposedly in this giant closed loop. And I'll let Alan and Toby jump in and start explaining that a little bit more. I just want to make this point real quick here, which is no, you can't just throw out the ether. That's just a fact within their own model. So why is the mainstream lying? Why is Neil deGrasse Tyson telling you that's all it did? Right? Why is this other video that I found, as soon as you look it up, what you see is someone else, and this right here, listen to his conclusion. Let's just listen to his conclusion real fast.
When we conducted this experiment, the ether's velocity relative to the Earth was 0. But the Earth is not still and it keeps moving. Let's wait for 6 months so that we can be sure the Earth's velocity direction has changed and conduct this experiment again. So, even after 6 months, the experiment does not show any interference pattern. The only conclusion we can make out of this is that ether does not exist and light does not need a medium.
The only conclusion that we can draw from this is that the ether does not exist.
Dude, the only thing we can conclude from this is ignoring the fringe pattern that didn't give us the amount that we needed, and then say that this whole experiment was a measurement of the ether velocity. Dude, that's so crazy, because they have to frame it that way, because when you realize that the independent variables of that experiment was the orientation of the device with respect to the assumed planes of motion that the Earth is going through, and then it didn't meet those, there was no time where the intersection point of that resulted in a fringe pattern of 30 kilometers a second. I mean, that's a wrap, dude. That has nothing to do with an ether velocity. It's literally about the motion of the Earth.
Exactly. And just so you guys know what we're talking about, here's a visualization. So here is what they expected to see. When it says expected, like I said, what did they use to get the prediction? They used the alleged orbit of the Earth, moving 30 kilometers a second, roughly 1 degree a day. They used that number, compared it to the quote-unquote speed of light, the distances the light was traveling, and then they got a predicted fringe shift. This is what it was expected to be. This was the prediction based on the assumed orbit of Earth. So there's an interference pattern, right? That's what they actually got. If you notice, those light beams are not perfectly in phase. They are not perfectly back together. They are still slightly separated and consistently based on direction. Why is the result consistent? So what Alan's talking about is, we did detect it. The guy in the video said, and again, after 6 months, they got 0 interference. That's incorrect. They got interference every single time, and they get interference every single time, like when Dayton did it 5 million times. See, drop something.
Yeah, like they didn't, when they got the 0, the one option would have been to say, oh, we were wrong. No heliocentrism. Pack it up. Everyone go home. Guess we've been wrong for hundreds of years, or, whoever was asserting that for however long. But, that wasn't a choice that they wanted to entertain. It's as simple as that, really. And as far as conceptualizing the fringe shift that Witz is showing there, one thing that helped for me to kind of get it a little bit is if you're familiar with the way that sound can go out of phase with itself. Like if you're trying to set up speakers and you align them incorrectly, they'll go out of phase with each other, where essentially the shape of those sound waves coming out of those speakers end up canceling each other out. The peaks and troughs line up with each other, and so you end up hearing essentially nothing coming from the speakers. And then when you're in phase, you get a nice big bright full loud sound. And so that's like with the fringe shift with the lasers, when the laser recombines with itself, if there's no fringe, or if there was no difference in the speed, or the quote unquote speed, or the time that it took to get for the laser to recombine with itself, or the light to recombine with itself, if there was no difference there, then you'd have a bright full signal. There'd be nothing out of phase. But as that difference in time occurs, and the one lags behind the other before they recombine, those peaks and troughs of the waves end up canceling each other out in a specific way, and they measure that with they called the interference pattern, or the fringe shift. But yeah, maybe that'll help someone. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, you mean to read the sound? You want to read it? You read it?
Oh, yeah. I was showing you how they did the derivation to make the prediction for how much fringe they should have according to the heliocentric model. So the V for the velocity of light, the little v for Earth's orbit, D for the distance of the path that light has to travel within the apparatus. So just taking the point from the source to the, the photographic sheet that they were projecting on. So just that entire length, adding up all the mirror reflections in between. So just getting that to a total distance of, I think it was like 64 meters or something like that. And then time would be, the passage of the of both arms or whatever. But they actually cancel that out. And then if you scroll down and then go to the left a little bit, where I highlighted with a circle there. So the reduced form of the equation to make the prediction is pretty much the exact same as the generalized Sagnac equation, where it's 2D, which is the there and back distribution of the length that light has to travel, and then v squared and over v squared is just the ratio that they're using of the velocity of Earth's orbit over the speed of light to derive how much fringe they should get for that.
There you go. So they're using an equation that's basically synonymous with the generalized Sagnac effect equation. And they're specifically accounting for the relationship between the assumed velocity of light and the assumed velocity of the Earth's orbit. So to even get your prediction, to compare it to a prediction, to call it a null result, you have to directly factor in the Earth's orbit specifically. That's the cause of the effect. That's what you're detecting. That's what you would be actually measuring, is the displacement from the assumed velocity of the Earth moving around the sun. The fact that people have resorted to the claim that it had nothing to do with the motion of the Earth is so desperate, bro. It's insane. So
yeah, one thing I like to say about it is just, so when you think about the fact that everything appears to be totally still and stationary, and airplanes don't have to account for a rotating Earth, they don't have to account for motion. There's essentially no measurable relative motion. Some people might try to argue about Coriolis or whatever, but that's really just, you're just going to be measuring air differentials or whatever. And there's no measurable, like, a plane doesn't land as if it's in motion, you know. We don't throw a football as if the Earth's going to curve as we throw it or whatever. But to someone trying to ascertain and be scientific about this topic, you would get to the point where you would say there's got to be some way that we can measure this motion. And so light interferometry was supposed to be that way, right? That's the way in which, if you can't feel it, see it, sniff it, prove it in any way, shape, or form physically, other than, you know, observations of the sky, which are, that's quite a leap to make, then you would use light, and you would use the idea, the medium, that the material medium that you'd have to have for electromagnetic propagation. And so, and they knew, going back to the 1800s, like Alan was pointing out, they knew very well from Fresnel, from Fizeau, from Arago. These guys studied light pretty intensely, and they did a bunch of experiments to show every which way that it was a wave, and, you know, not particles, that's for sure. And that was, you know, that was the premise here, and that was the idea, was, okay, tell me whatever you want about the relative motion, about you know, reference frames or whatever, but this would be the one absolute way that would be, you know, scientific. And we can, you know, this is like getting to the bottom of it. Like, if we can't measure it here, then I guess everything's relative and, you know, nothing makes sense, or we're just not in motion. But yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and read out these real fast, just pop them up on the screen so no one feels left out here. So shout out to Dakota Dunn. We shouted you out earlier, but he signed up for a level 4 GLOBEBUSTERS membership. Shout out to you. Thank you so much for signing up. Yeah, welcome to the GLOBEBUSTERS. And then we also are going to pop yours up on the screen as well here. Keep spreading Adonai's word so that all humans realize the lie of heliocentricity. Thank you so much. We read that one. And then we got a couple more just to pop them all up on the screen. We got a new one that just popped in. Richard B. Thanks to GLOBEBUSTERS for the fantastic content and telling and truth telling. Thank you for the $50 tip, Richard. Very generous, brother. Thank you so much for the tip over on Ko-fi.
Much love, Richard.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Much love. All right, cool. So shout out to you guys again. If you want to support the stream, it's on the screen there. Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/GLOBEBUSTERS. Links pinned in the YouTube and in the description. You can also go to Rockfin, and we'll finish the stream out at Rockfin here in a moment. All right, so just to get through here, because then I want to kind of open up to what you guys want to throw in about this, but we went through these questions, and we got down to, would removing the ether alone explain the results of Michelson-Morley? The answer is no. The next question is, did Michelson-Morley debunk Newtonian mechanics? Now, that's what that video was about that we were talking about, right? And if you were seeing what we were showing over here, of course, Newton says the Earth is moving in a curved path. The gravity from the sun's pulling it around the sun in a curved path. That if there wasn't that force of gravity from the sun that was pulling the Earth would keep moving straight. But since that there's a force acting on the object of the Earth, pulling it towards the sun, it pulls it out of its straight path. So Newton says an object will continue in a straight path unless an outside force acts on it, and that Newton said that space was absolute and fixed, which means that object is absolutely and objectively moving in a curved path. Not it's curved over here, it's straight over there, but then it's curved over here, but then it's straight over there. It's either straight or curved, period, according to Newton, because space itself is fixed. And the analogy I use is if it's like taking out a piece of graph paper and drawing different circles and orbits on it. That's how you do it with Newtonian mechanics. With Einstein, you have to pull out a different piece of graph paper depending on wherever you are. So in Newton, you could draw the whole universe, and every circle you draw is just what it is. Either it's moving straight, it's moving curved, it's moving in an ellipse. It's all absolute because there's one absolute space, which is that piece of graph paper. But with Einstein, you have to have a different piece of graph paper for everywhere in space that you're observing it from. And really, then you have to crumble it up and throw it in some water and then just, hit yourself in the head a couple times and then smoke some DMT and then try to understand how the graph paper's there but not there, but it actually has multiple dimensions, but it can change, and then blah, blah, blah. The point is that it's different, it's absolute and fixed. If the Earth was actually moving in an orbit around the sun in a curved path using Newtonian gravity and Newtonian mechanics, applying the first law of motion and the fact that gravity was supposedly a force in relation to absolute and fixed space, interferometer would have detected the motion because, of course, the Earth would be orbiting in an actual curved path in relation to these light beams here. Okay? So when the question is, where are we at here? Yeah. Did Michelson-Morley debunk Newtonian mechanics? The answer is yes. Now, you could put a nuance here and be like, unless you have a stationary Earth. So in theory, could you keep a stationary Earth and still try to use Newton? Yes, you could. But from within the framework of heliocentrism, the Michelson-Morley experiment debunked Newtonian mechanics. Experiment isn't a scientific experiment. So that's just how, and of course, yeah, it's an empirical measurement, and we have different aspects of science. That was a joke. But so now we're going to move to the next one. The answer is yes. Now people can't let go of this, and we kind of played the video showing it. Like, they need Newton to be true, and then they say, but the math still works sometimes. It's like, we're not talking about math. We're talking about physics. We're talking about the mechanics. Like, is there an actual force? Is the Earth actually moving in a curved path or not? That's what we're talking about. You think it's flying through space around the sun. Okay, is it curving around the sun? And Newton said yes. Einstein says yes and no. The object is curving and it's not curving.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. When you're on the Earth, it's going straight. But when you're off of the Earth, it's curving.
How did we let them get it? That's just crazy.
Yeah,
it's just nonsensical.
It's mind-bending nonsense.
Yeah. And everybody, I thought this man was just the smartest man in history when I was growing up. That's what I was always taught.
Yeah, it's insane. It's mind-bending nonsense. And I'm sure that Alan, my boy Toby here, would happily help you guys understand a little better that, of course, what we actually use is an absolute stationary lab frame. And we can talk about it in just a second. I want to pass it over to them and kind of give their takes on some of this. But in reality, you measure everything against the Earth at rest. Okay, and then just act like it's not really at rest. So, and I would actually love, I'll try to remember, they even will go as far as to use the stars as their as their reference. Okay, so the answer is yes, it debunked Newtonian mechanics. So could you just get rid of the ether? No. So is relativity required to explain Michelson-Morley within heliocentrism? Yes. because Einstein said, oh, the orbit's actually not curving. When you're on the Earth, it's free falling in a linear path, a straight path, with a linear velocity. That the Earth is free falling like you drop something. There's no force acting on it. It's going in a straight path while you're on the Earth, and it's free falling through the geodesic or curvature of space-time. So it is free falling straight down, but if you zoomed out from another reference frame, you would see it's falling down this space-time continuum that's curving. So it's curving, but it's not curving while you're on the Earth. From the Earth's reference frame, from the Earth's perspective, you're free falling in a straight path. So that's why I'm saying it didn't detect the orbit, because you were trying to detect the Earth's orbit, assuming that the Earth curves around the sun, but actually while you're on the Earth, it free falls. Get rid of Newton, get rid of the ether, add a whole new dimension to space, change all of physics, say that time can slow down and that it's physical, say that space is physical and it can bend and warp, right? And then you can say that basically the universe is conspiring against you with its space-time continuum wand that bends and warps reality in terms of perception to make it appear as if the Earth is actually a geocentric stationary object, when in reality it's flying through space with multiple vectors, and you think that it's curving because it's going around the sun, but actually it's free falling in a straight path, you just can't tell. Okay, that is a Stillman. So if relativity is required to explain Michelson-Morley, by explaining the orbit of the Earth cannot be detected from the Earth, and we did, of course, just now show Einstein saying that very thing, right? I mean, I guess we can do this just to do it here. I mean, we just showed Einstein literally saying that. So, come up here. The second class of facts to which we have alluded has reference to the question whether or not the motion of the Earth in space can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments. The motion of Earth in space can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments. We've already remarked that all attempts led to a negative result. So he's saying, no, you can't, right? Because he goes on to explain why he thinks that is. So, if relativity is required to explain Michelson-Morley's null results, quote unquote, by explaining the orbit of the Earth cannot be detected while on the Earth, would a consistent detection of motion falsify heliocentrism? Very simple. If the heliocentric model required general relativity and Einsteinian orbit to explain why Michelson-Morley's results didn't match the prediction where it should have been detecting the Earth moving, and the relativity's answer to why it didn't is that it can't be detected. You can't detect that motion. And that's why it doesn't match the prediction of 30 kilometers per second, because you can't, because it's free falling in a straight path. You can't tell. There is no force, it's free falling, it's going straight, so you can't measure with interferometer. Then if that's the explanation that heliocentrism requires for Michelson-Morley, would a consistent detection of motion in Michelson-Morley experiments refute or falsify heliocentrism? The answer is yes. And specifically relativity's explanation for it. But you can have no explanation that could come replace relativity and keep heliocentrism alive that wouldn't have to be relativistic. Whatever they propose as the replacement to Einstein in the future will have to still be relativistic, because it has to explain why we can't detect the motion of the Earth. Okay, so hopefully that was all followed, and it's very simple in conclusion, right? Michelson-Morley debunked Newtonian mechanics, and now relativity and heliocentrism are refuted if you're able to consistently detect some type of motion during the Michelson-Morley experiment, and it's not just randomized instrumental error that we can ignore, which is kind of their excuse for why we do keep detecting stuff. All right, cool. Alan, I saw you pop off.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, going back to that Fitzgerald quote that you were reading, they all understood the implications of the previous experiments giving a null result for their belief system, right? So going back to Arago, Airy's failure, the guy that did the sodium vapor test, which was another early interferometer thing. So like they've got consistent L's looking for Earth's motion, right? And then they did Michelson-Morley, and they were like, this is our last chance, boys. Otherwise, we're going to have to redo all of physics or admit that we were wrong, right? So they took their measurements, They didn't get what they wanted, and they came up with a abstraction of a coordinate system to describe a time difference to explain the lack of motion. So they put the velocity in a hyperbolic curvature between two reference systems of a stationary observer on Earth and a stationary observer on the sun, right? And the distance between, or the contraction between them is our velocity, right? That the imaginary time difference that they invoked to explain the velocity in the first place. It's insane that that people fell for it. And like looking back at, reading the history of this and find like there was a lot of difficulty getting people to accept this, physicists to accept this. And it's like, where we're looking at it now, we see everyone's already accepted it. It's the mainstream thing. Nobody's really critiquing it analytically. I mean, the process when people understood this, like, and the implications of it, convincing that generation of people that relativity was like super correct and definitely the way forward. That's why there was so much resistance to it. This is insane. And it's not even like a real explanation to anything, man. They literally just did a trick with a graph and everyone was like, oh, no way. There's our velocity.
That's crazy, man. Yo, and just to kind of support what he's saying here, this is what some of the physicists said after the test. Albert Michelson said, this conclusion directly contradicts the explanation, which it presupposes that the Earth moves. Oh, okay. Nothing to do with the motion of the Earth, guys.
Oh, no way. Look,
yeah.
He didn't find the ether. The ether velocity was 0, apparently. Dude, yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, had nothing to do with the motion of the Earth, but the guy who did the test, Albert Michelson, said that the conclusion directly contradicted the presupposition that the Earth moves. Here's Henri Poincaré, which is the person that came up with the 4D space geometry that Einstein actually hijacked for his theory. Quote, a great deal of research has been carried out concerning the influence of the Earth's movement. The results were always negative. So in the context of it, here he is again saying, we do not have and cannot have any means of discovering whether or not we are carried along in a uniform motion of translation. Talking about the Earth in space. This because Michelson-Morley should have been so conclusive and it didn't detect it. That means like we cannot ever have a way to prove it. I mean, that is a huge deal. Why are people lying about it? Here is Wolfgang Pauli. The failure of the many attempts to measure terrestrially any effects of the Earth's motion. And he proceeds to go on saying that basically require us to think that relativity is true. It's our only option. Here he is again. This is all in the primary context of all of these quotes is discussing Michelson-Morley and things such as Airy's failure, which is a success. So here he is saying again the failure of many attempts to measure terrestrially any effects of the Earth's motion. Here's Arthur Eddington talking about Michelson-Morley. This is of course from the Eddington experiment. He said there was just one alternative. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to have been nil. It had nothing to do with the motion of the Earth, guys. Arthur Eddington said, yeah, like that. Or the motion of the Earth, the velocity of Earth through space might happen to have just been 0. Nothing. Okay.
That's crazy.
I mean, why we got to go find these quotes too? That's the real question. Here's Henrik Lorentz in the context of Michelson-Morley. This is who came up with Lorentz contraction, right? That we just read. Einstein said that they had to hijack, right? You had Lorentz and Fitzgerald come up with the contraction. This is Henrik Lorentz. Pretty smart guy. He said, briefly, everything occurs as if the Earth were at rest. Why are all these physicists saying that after Michelson-Morley, it looks like the Earth's at rest? It looks like the Earth could be at rest. One of our explanations is that the Earth might have to be at rest. If it's not, they're all writing about how this test is so mind-boggling that either the Earth is just at rest or we have to convince ourselves to believe all of these outlandish things that seem impossible and insane and seem like they go directly against all the other evidence we have of electrical field theory, etc. If you go read these, and I'm gonna revise a bunch of these to make an awesome Michelson-Morley PowerPoint, and I'm gonna put the specific citations and stuff. Go read them. You're gonna see what they're talking about. Like this quote right here. The failure of the many attempts to measure terrestrially any effects of the Earth's motion. By the way, terrestrially means on the Earth. Yeah. So just like Einstein said terrestrially, they're all saying that you can't measure it from the Earth. He goes on in the rest of this quote to start talking about like some of the more seemingly absurd claims of relativity. And he's like, but this has to be true. Or the Earth's not moving. So that's the context. And then, yeah, we'll just stay there because there are some more in here in the context, but I don't want to have to look through all of them.
It's been said how many times over and over and over again by physicists that, yeah, this is really kind of strange because everything points to the fact that we're not really moving. I mean, how many of them have to say it before it's like, maybe we should go back a little bit and ask some questions about the direction we took 150 years ago.
Yeah, if you guys see this is from A Stubbornly Persistent Illusion 2007, which is a foreword of tons of Einstein's writings in Stephen Hawking publication. And you see this quote may look familiar, right, to the question whether or not the motion of the Earth can be made perceptible in terrestrial experiments. We've already remarked that every time we do that, it's negative. Without relativity, it's really hard to reconcile that. That's from the paper we just read, Relativity, Special and General Theory by Einstein. There's a couple more in here I did want to show, but the point is this it? Yeah, here you go. Here's physicist James Coleman talking about Michelson-Morley. The easiest explanation was that the Earth was fixed in the ether, and that everything else in the universe moved with respect to the Earth and the ether. Such an idea was not considered seriously, since it would mean, in effect, that our Earth occupied the omnipotent position in the universe, with all the other heavenly bodies paying homage, some say homage, by moving around it. What? I mean, are you kidding me?
They're pretty much saying we are in a religion.
Exactly. Like the easiest and most obvious explanation, what the evidence actually showed you, was that the Earth was fixed in the ether and that everything else in the universe moved with respect to the Earth and the ether. But that wasn't even considered seriously, because what it would mean is that the Earth has the most powerful position in the universe, with all the other heavenly bodies paying homage by moving around it. What? Your reason for is just because what? The implications of the Earth being in the center is that the Earth is special, and so it wasn't even considered special, like considered seriously? That's your argument?
So maybe the ancients believe in this place was a divine creation isn't so crazy, you know? Even our physicists of today will say, yeah, you can't argue against it. It's a philosophical standpoint.
Let's see if the chat can get this right. Let's pop quiz. Read the end of this and tell me what fallacy. Now, there's multiple fallacies, but what's the primary fallacy here that's being used as the argument? So it wasn't considered seriously because, right? And then you present your argument. What's the fallacy here? It's an appeal to incredulity. Okay, it's saying the idea is just seems fantastical. It's hard for me to believe or wrap my mind around it, so it can't be true. That the magnitude of that idea is so great that I don't think it can be true. Like, I'm incredulous. Now, in fact, what we found out is actually it's even worse than that. They absolutely do understand it. They absolutely can comprehend it and know it does make sense. They just don't like it. It's actually even more egregious than an appeal to incredulity. Philosophical bias. Here is Bernard Cohen. There's no planetary observation by which on Earth, well, we're not talking about that. Okay, there's a couple more here somewhere, but I think you guys get the idea. And this is Einstein infill in the evolution of physics, and they're basically saying, of course, whether the sun is at rest and the Earth moves around it, or vice versa, It's just simply two different coordinate systems and conventions now. And in reality, that's not true. They're not equally valid because Toby and Alan, either or, what do we have to use in reality for all of our tests?
Oh, the lab frame, my dude. That'd be the lab frame.
A lab frame. What's a lab frame?
It's that stationary, non-rotating, designated area that's always just locally inertial enough, despite the Earth is rotating, that all experiments can be conducted, that the laws of physics can be derived from the stationary perspective. But so that's what the lab frame is.
It's using the Earth and where your lab is as stationary in reference to the Earth being stationary. So how is it equally valid to say that the opposite is true with no evidence?
Yep. All physics, all equations, all reference frames have to be covariant with the lab frame, meaning they have to be backwards compatible with stationary, non-rotating inertial frame where the laws of physics apply, and then we receive them and observe them correctly, right? So it's not the other way around where the geocentric position, the stationary Earth position, has to be backwards compatible with heliocentrism. It's the complete opposite.
And let me show you this. Wait, come over here. Okay, so again, if we read here, if you come down on the PowerPoint, sorry, give me a second. If you come down, you'll see he says that Lorentz and Fitzgerald, who we just heard from, right, rescued the heliocentric models theory from difficulty by saying that there was a contraction of the body in the direction of motion, and that it just so happened to contract the perfect amount to compensate for the missing time difference that should have been there if the Earth was moving. And by the way, that just random claim to odds, right? That like it just so happens to contract it just the right amount to match what it would be if it wasn't moving in relation to something else. Why is it that exact same amount? What is the physical mechanism of it? Neither of those two questions are answered today in 2024 at the highest levels of academia from any university professor or any university period, even theoretically, in terms of relativity. How did it just so happen to be the perfect amount to make it look as if it's stationary? And what's the physical mechanism that causes it? Literally, neither one of those things are even answered. Still, in 2024, they don't even have a theoretical answer for those two questions. It just must be true.
No explanation provided for the actual mechanism of contraction. Like, is it the crystal lattice structure of the apparatus that's contract? Like, how does it work? Nothing provided, right? But then they come in with space-time, do the exact same thing, and don't provide any mechanism either.
As I'm saying, it's right. Like they don't even offer a mechanism in relativity, and they don't explain why it's that amount.
Yeah, and it's even more egregious with relativity because with the ether theory, at least the contraction would be physical and proportional to, it would be like a reality contraction essentially, right? With relativity, the attraction is apparent relative to the observer's velocity. So for multiple observers, they will observe multiple apparent contractions. So you don't even have a physical contraction. You have like a non-cohesive timeline of events that's always perpetually out of sync relative to the velocity of an observer and how they see an event.
I mean, just absolutely mind-bending nonsense. And the point I wanted to make here with the PDF is like he points out that Fitzgerald and Lorentz, they tried to save it because all the physicists were perplexed. Yeah, we know. We just read a bunch of them being super perplexed, right? We read them. I mean, in fact, them being perplexed is we have specific context. It's like we believe that the Earth is moving, but we just disproved it and don't know what to do. They were perplexed because they thought they knew the Earth was moving. It turns out that it wasn't. And we just read all of these physicists, many of which is the ones that he's talking to, right? Are talking about being perplexed. Even Arthur Eddington, Wolfgang Pauli, Edward Morley, Albert Michelson, Einstein himself, even as late as 2007, Stephen Hawking admits it's an extremely perplexing result, right? And And the point here is keep this in mind, that he said that also from the theory of relativity, the solution of this difficulty was the right one. Keep that in mind when we then come back over here and we go to read this quote. Now he's going to now explain what Lorentz proposed, right? He's going to explain the Lorentz contraction that was proposed. And like Alan just told you, it's just mind-bending nonsense. It's an appeal to possibility because it's possible, which, by the way, you can't even logically propose that it's possible. You can't substantiate that this is possible, right? Other than like an electrical contraction that does exist all over Heaviside, right? But like appeal to possibility is, since it's possible, then it must be true. My conclusion must be true because it's possible, or even quote unquote probable. This is not only improbable, it's impossible, but they just, even if it was technically possible, that doesn't mean it's true anyway, right? So it's an appeal to possibility, an appeal to incredulity, a reification fallacy, affirming the consequent, begging the question, and the most egregious is that they're reifying the actual space and time itself. There's many other fallacies. The point is that if your fundamental argumentation for your conclusion is incredibly fallacious, that means it lacks logic and reason, it's invalid, it's inadmissible, it's stupid, it's irrelevant, it doesn't matter at all, we don't have to entertain it, and if people can't come up with anything better than that in a century, it's probably because you're believing something religiously that isn't true. If you have to turn your head to evidence and the only thing you can come up with to propose your idea is like just pure blind belief in reification fallacies, it's probably not true. So I'll read this real quick. This is James A. Coleman, professor of physics and chairman of the Department of Physics at the American International College in Springfield, Massachusetts. In Relativity for the Layman, the explanation which had the most appeal in accounting for the negative results of the Michelson-Morley experiment was one that literally was dreamed up for that purpose. Okay, let's just soak that in. Okay, so was there some type of evidence that they observed that this happened? No. It was dreamed up for the very purpose of what? Accounting for the negative result of Michelson-Morley. And of course, when they say it's a negative result, they mean in relation to the prediction they expected if the Earth was in fact orbiting at the velocity that it would have to be if the heliocentric model is true. So, the explanation which had the most appeal in accounting for the negative result of the Michelson-Morley experiment was one that was literally dreamed up for the purpose. It is the so-called Fitzgerald-Lorentz contraction, which we just read Einstein talking about. In 1893, so this is 6 years after the test, Fitzgerald suggested that all objects contracted in the direction of their motion through the ether. Meaning if an object is moving to the east, it contracts in that direction. If it's moving to the south, it contracts in that direction. Contracts in the direction that the object's moving. And he said it was doing that through the ether. He reasoned that if ordinary objects flattened out upon impact with other objects, like a rubber ball hitting a wall or a ripe tomato dropped on the floor, for example, then why would it not be possible? It's an appeal to possibility. Then why would it not be possible for objects that move through the ether to have the force of the ether push them in or contract them? This is literally, it was dreamed up with the thought experiment of throwing a ball against the wall. If you took like frame by frame, really slow motion video of that ball, you would see that it's flattened out upon impact. If you dropped a ripe tomato on the ground, same thing, right? Of course, just simple, like physical contact will cause it to be slightly flattened out. So if that's the case, then why isn't it possible for objects that move through the ether to have the force of the ether push them in or contract them? This would adequately explain the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment. It actually wouldn't do it adequately, though. You still have to explain why it just so happens to push it in the perfect amount every time, and based on direction. But he would say, well, what he's saying is, well, the object is moving in that direction, right? And since the object is moving in that direction, then it's getting pressed by the ether in that direction. Similar to riding a bike through air or swimming in a pool, right? So that's what they mean by ether drift when they talk about it. It's like if you were to swim in a pool, you basically create this like area around you from where you're departing through the medium. Same thing with if you're riding a bike. There would be like basically a drift or some type of resistance or impedance, which is resistivity and reactance. Let's not get too sidetracked, sorry. I want to make sure everyone understands it for sure. So he says this would adequately explain the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment, except for what's actually causing it to have the perfect amount. But at least they're offering a physical mechanism here, right? He's telling you that the physicality of the ether combined with the physicality of the object moving through the ether will cause an impact like throwing a ball against the wall. So they are offering a mechanism, keep note of that, but not addressing the actual amount, just so happening to be exactly what's needed. The arm of the interferometer moving against the ether would be shortened so that even though the light wave traveling in that particular arm might be slowed down by the ether wind, which is like riding your bike through the air and causing like a wind around you, basically. And that particular arm might be slowed down by the ether wind. This would be compensated for by having its path shortened. Objections to the Fitzgerald-Lorentz contraction hypothesis were rampant, as was to be expected, not only because there was no evidence to prove that such an effect took place, but particularly because Fitzgerald could not explain why objects would contract due to motion through the ether. The contraction hypothesis was originally advanced only as a possible explanation for Michelson and Morley's results, providing such an effect existed. Then, too, the theory said that all materials traveling with the same velocity with respect to the ether would contract the same fractional amount. Since iron is much heavier and stronger than wood, for example, one would expect a greater contraction for wood than for iron, but this too went unanswered. This is very important. It's offering a physical mechanism, right? Saying the ether is physically contracting the object in the direction that it's moving. There was a problem with that, though. Well, then why would all objects contract the same way? If the physical ether is contracting wood or iron, it should obviously be able to contract the wood more, right? Because objects have different strengths, different weights, different densities.
Yeah, none of that makes sense to me. That just seems like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. There's so many different variables that you would think that this contraction would disrupt so much, you know, like just your bones and your muscle, just all these different things would contract at different amounts.
Correct.
Just
yes.
like, yeah, it would be devastating.
So
Much stuff.
So that's the easiest refutation here. I mean, obviously, that there's no actual evidence for it's not possible, or you're just doing a possibility, assuming it's possible, or you're not explaining why it's the exact right amount that it needed to be. But it's even worse than that. The objects would have to contract at different rates based on their density, their weights, the strength of the material, right? So there is no answer for that because he's going to have to claim that they all contract at the same rate. So it doesn't work on its face, right? Now, here's why this is important. Relativity doesn't even offer a mechanism. Much less does it explain how that physical mechanism just so happens to apply to all objects the same way. It doesn't even offer one. So if anyone ever did get the balls to propose some physical explanation from relativity, how there's contraction, like an actual mechanism, it would immediately be able to be destroyed by the same refutation of this argument. And this is where people get super confused. This is where Einstein specifically had to come out and correct people, because people will now tell you, the contraction is just an optical effect. When you're on the Earth, you won't see any contraction, but when you're on the sun, you will see contraction. It's just an optical effect. It's an illusion. And then Einstein had to point out, no. It's an actual physical effect. The actual object has to physically get shorter and contract. It's not just an optical effect. You can only measure it getting shorter at certain places. Okay, so now this is a bit of a higher level, but I mean, the heliocentric model is not even close to being viable, and we have like the AR-15s lined up on it, waiting for them to try to stumble through the next door. They're not even, it's impossible. It's dead at every angle, okay? So I want to take the time to kind of explain that, because I think that that's important. And also, just so you know what happened, was they went and tested this, because if this ether proposal by these people were correct, by Lawrence and Fitzgerald, well, that would mean that you could have two arms that were different lengths in the Michelson-Morley, and you should be able to tell that one of them got shorter. You should actually be able to physically measure that it's getting shorter based on the direction of motion of, say, the orbit. So they went and tested it, and the arms, of course, didn't change length. Right. It didn't change length based on where we were supposedly flying through space and what time of year it was. So they disproved this idea physically, like objectively, falsified it. And that's why Einstein comes in and says, we see too from the viewpoint of relativity that was the right explanation, but the interpretation is different. And then he just does mental gymnastics saying it's about space and time. We don't fully understand the mechanism, and I can't explain why it's the exact amount. So I know that was a long, kind of a bit heavy there, but I think that part is rarely discussed. Anybody have anything you want to throw in on that?
Yeah, so, it's just a big house of cards held up by gaslighting. And so when you start getting really confused about this stuff, that's just because it's a bunch of nonsense, really. Like, the Michelson-Morley result was null, but then later on, they do Michelson-Gale-Pearson, and they say they measured rotation. So then they go on and they say this thing about, it's, we can't measure the linear vector of motion. We can only measure the rotational vector of motion. That's incoherent. It's not intuitive. The linear path through the geodesic that they have to invoke, Einstein's linear path through a geodesic of space-time, that's incoherent. Time dilation is not something that we see or experience or can substantiate, because actually we wouldn't be able to by definition, because it would be outside of our lab frame of time. But that's incoherent. Length contraction is incoherent, as was just shown. Intuitively, we all know about the idea of relative simultaneity, which just means that there is an absolute reference frame, and that we're all seeing things relative to that absolute reference frame. And so, the reason that this stuff is so complicated is not because, understanding electromagnetic waves propagation is complicated. It's because trying to say that what happened when they went to go measure electromagnetic waves propagation relative to the motion of the Earth, what happened when they went to do that their explanation for why they couldn't accept that result, that's where all the insane complication comes from. And so, it's all held up by gaslighting. Every step of the way, everything I just listed, that's what people are going to use to tell you, you just don't know. You just don't know. You don't know about this paradox. You don't know about this fallacy. You don't know about this nonsensical, incoherent argument. That's all they ever have. And, that's why it's so easy to get frustrated and just be like, all right, I guess I just don't get relativity. They went to space, NASA, blah, blah, blah. But, don't let them gaslight you. I would, trust your instincts, trust reality before you go taking that essentially religious leap. And the ones that really look into it, the physicists, they actually have to hit a crossroads eventually where they actually have to realize, holy cow, relativity doesn't even provide the predictive value that I always thought it gave. Because actually what it always is an equation that they have to do after the fact to make what just happened fit their model. Because it's always, the relative motion or the relative velocity was measured relative to the quote unquote speed of light. They always measure those relative velocities, always, whether it's rotational in a Michelson interferometer, in a Sagnac device, whether it's in GPS directly from one GPS craft to another, which is linear, or whether it's Ruyang Wang in 2004, specifically setting up a linear portion of a fiber optic setup and measuring the linear motion of the fiber optic waveguide. So all those things together, I mean, it's common sense, and it's just Yeah, don't let them gaslight you. That's what it's all held up by. That's pretty much it. I kind of went on a tangent there.
Oh, you're good. No, I totally agree with you, man. Let me and basically it's like, that's why I did play the video at the beginning, because like, we stand right in there, we take it, we know that they're lying and gaslighting you, trying to make you feel like you're insane or incompetent or whatever, but we know that we're true. You guys can do the same thing. And it's just literally mind bending. It's funny, it's about bending and warping, because it's what it does to your mind. Shout out to Lowry over on YouTube. Thank you for the $20 super chat. Needed to get some nerding back in my life. Good to see you guys still crushing every week. Thank you so much for the support over on YouTube, brother. Much love. And then Richard B, thank you for gifting 5 GLOBEBUSTERS memberships on YouTube as well. We also have over on Rockfin, Murray Cole. I don't know if this one was read yet, but another great topic. You did read it?
No, not yet.
Oh, another great topic. I look forward to every episode. I learn something new every week. Thank you for the $20 tip on Rockfin, and I'm glad that you enjoy, man. Much love. Thank you so much. And again, also, if you guys are interested in memberships, you can sign up on Ko-fi as well for memberships. There are different tiers. I'm going to try to talk to everyone and see if they're cool with throwing the GLOBEBUSTERS some perks if they sign up for memberships. We'll figure it out. Maybe like some exclusive hangout or merchandise or whatever. Sneak previews, etc. But that's what's going to make GLOBEBUSTERS possible, so we thank you in advance. And maybe we can move over to Rockfin in just a second for like the final little bit of the show. We didn't get started till a little bit later. If anyone has to go, they can. And then let me read this next quote. The Michelson-Morley experiment this is Arthur Eddington from the Eddington experiment in 1919, one of the most famous people within the heliocentric paradigm, which that was all a lie anyway, of course, right? They got most of the measurements completely failed. They just ignored them, cherry picked like 2 of the 33 or whatever, and then even those couldn't be verified, couldn't be found, had to be mathematically doctored, and then admittedly was a major problem for relativity. But all that to say, here he is saying, the Michelson-Morley experiment has thus failed to detect our motion through the ether because the effect looked for, the delay of one of the light waves, is exactly compensated by an automatic contraction of the matter forming the apparatus. Are you kidding me? So, like, saying that just because they say ether in here, so people say, oh, but if you just get rid of the ether, it's not needed. That isn't true, though. We explained all of that at the beginning, so hopefully it was digestible so that you guys understand. Getting rid of the ether alone doesn't explain it. You still have to explain why there's a missing time difference. It didn't detect the Earth moving in a curved path, right? Even Einstein says that the contraction is needed within relativity to explain it. Just a different interpretation. Here's Eddington telling you that the way to explain how we didn't detect the Earth's motion in Michelson-Morley, the assumed orbit, right, is that the matter forming the apparatus, right, was contracted, is exactly compensated. The delay of one of the light waves is exactly compensated by dude, this is such a joke to me. Exactly compensated by an automatic contraction of the matter forming the apparatus. Do you know how insane it is to say it's exact? Do you guys know how precise interferometry is? But now this is the reality. Actually, we did get our friendship, right? But the claim, even the claim on his face that it could be exact is insane, bro. Interferometry is so incredibly precise. It measures in such little bitty small increments in the sense of light. Like, what did Dayton Miller say? Like, it had like a sensitivity of 1/100,000th of a wavelength or something like that. Like, insane precision. To act like, oh, the matter just happens to contract just that perfect amount is literally lunacy. It's actual mental illness. It's actually insane. But anyway, let me also pop up this. So shout out to my boy Dan O. Thank you for supporting over on Ko-fi. Yeah, bless. Yeah, bless. Thank you so much. And I believe that was an incredibly generous donation. That was $100. Dan O, thank you so much for the $100 tip on Ko-fi. Greatly appreciated, my brother. Thank you so much. So shout out to you. And
Absolutely.
yeah, very generous, man. And
You're showing the love today. We appreciate it.
yeah, thank you guys so much. And that is, again, of course, ko-fi.com/globebusters. Ko-fi.com/globebusters, link in the description. All right. Are you guys cool to move over to Rockfin for the last little bit? And I've been talking a lot, so I want to see if Toby and Alan, if you guys are cool to stick around, if you guys want to kind of pick up the torch here and throw in some information that you think would kind of be important as well. But real fast, I'll just tell you right here. This is Bernard Haffey or whatever. The data were almost unbelievable. There was only one other conclusion to draw, that the Earth was at rest. Right, that's 1960. Michelson and the Speed of Light by Bernard Haffey, which I think is a biography of a scientist. So those telling you it had nothing to do with emotion, and they just don't understand. And so I went through some of these quotes just to show you it's just a fact, and you shouldn't need to gaslight and misrepresent and lie about it. If the Earth is actually moving, it should just be, it shouldn't matter. Here is Lincoln Barnett, also same thing in the context of Michelson-Morley. No physical experiment ever proved that the Earth is actually in motion. And so it just goes on and on, bro, to be honest. Here is another quote about Michelson-Morley. This is Douglas Glancaul in Physics Principles with Applications. So like a university textbook in 1980. This null result was one of the great puzzles of physics at the end of the 19th century. One possibility was that the velocity would be zero and that no friend shift would be expected. But this implies that the Earth is somehow a preferred object. Only with respect to the Earth would the speed of light be c as predicted by Maxwell's equations. This is tantamount to assuming that the Earth is the central body of the universe. The argument is, but this would somehow mean that the Earth is a preferred object. That's not an argument. All right. So anyway, I think that's enough. I think you guys get it, that like anyone that's misrepresenting the Michelson-Morley is just having to lie. All right, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy, man. I'm gonna move us over from YouTube if you guys are down, and then like I said, I did get started. We did get started late, so really we've only been going for 2 hours. But if anyone has to leave, you guys can, and I'll keep it rolling if I need to. And if you guys want to stay, then that's also cool as well. So anything you guys want to say to the YouTube before we get out of here, off of YouTube?
Yo, YouTube's gonna keep censoring the truth, so even though it's the most comfortable platform, maybe start trying to get used to some other platforms. I'm working on it myself. Also, if you want to follow me at Toby Earth, I am on YouTube, but I'm also on Rumble and X, and then also at Ether Cosmology, where me, Alan, and Shane St. Pierre are always. We do Tuesdays, we do presentations. Thursdays, we do live research and reading. But yeah, this week specifically, we're talking about Ru Yang Wang, who linearized the Sagnac effect, and we're going to get into the details of what that means and how that is another big problem for relativity.
Nice, very cool, very cool. If the mods will help me out, if you guys can drop the link to the Rockfin in the YouTube chat, it would be greatly appreciated. Shout out to Justin, thank you for doing that. We'll give it a few minutes for everyone to kind of move over, but we're gonna really get into some of the home runs, I think. If Alan and Toby are down to kind of talk a little bit longer, either way, we're gonna keep it going. You guys want to stick around for the end, and then we also there's a few things that Zack mentioned, some interesting political things going on in terms of like the world as a stage, that we'll kind of maybe throw in at the end about some current events that we're not gonna even be able to discuss on here, of course. So yeah, go to rockfin.com/globebusters. Link to the specific stream is being dropped in the YouTube. And
before we get out, could I share something real quick, Austin?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to show people in Fortnite right now. I got the maps up, and one of them is actually, it's real easy to find. You just go down to the hidden gems down here, and it's the Australian Battle Royale solo. I'm gonna put flat Earth, I think, in here. Just flat Earth. I'm not sure. But you can see when you click in here, more from creator, and then it'll bring up all the maps. I got North America, Africa, South America, so it's coming along. And if you need to know how to get there, in the GLOBEBUSTERS page under community, I dropped a thing where I put all the map codes in here. So if your children play Fortnite, it's super clean. There's no, bad stuff. People that are making maps, they really have a good censorship thing. You have to go through answer a bunch of stuff on the questionnaires, and then they put it in age brackets and stuff like that. So they're real serious about keeping kids from seeing things they're not supposed to. But there's none of that in here, and everything on here is like Witsit has his own mountain on here, and David Weiss has his boat in here, and Jeran is along the west coast out in the beach. And it's flat Earth everything. It's got a bunch of different flat Earth companies. I couldn't put .coms in there, but you can go and look like Flat Earth Trucking. If you go and look up Flat Earth Trucking, there's actually a trucking company that's called Flat Earth Trucking now. And Flat Earth Coins is in there, Flat Earth Pizza. There's just Flat Earth Farms. Yeah, and I put a bunch of the bigger, YouTubers and people like that in our community, and they have their name in big letters on mountains and on different buildings and structures. And so it's just trying to promote flat Earth to a younger audience, And yeah, that's where you can find that information.
Nice. Very cool. Take that off. And rock and loop, yeah. Okay, cool. I think we're going to roll out and go over to Rockfin. So yeah, guys, the link's in the description, rockfin.com/globebusters. You can still chat there. We're also t.me/globebusters is our Telegram chat. I may overlay that on the stream for the last bit of the stream because it's uncensored and people can talk in the Telegram as well. So that link is in the description also. That's t.me/globebusters. So of course you can drop any type of sources and stuff like that that you would want to. And I may overlap it on the screen. And that's it. Also, just a quick reminder to anyone. I was recently demonetized on YouTube, and I had a bunch of people that had become miswits and become members. And of course, it just removed all of them. We had people that were members for 15 months. They just axed everything, denied my appeal, completely just removed it. And that's why we are creating alternative ways to actually support GLOBEBusters monthly to help the show stay alive and keep going. That isn't dependent upon YouTube that can just come drop the axe on us. And so if you want to be a monthly member, like I said, we have that offered at Ko-fi.com as well. So you can click the link, the first link in the description. You can go to ko-fi.com/GLOBEBusters. You can either one-time donations or memberships on there. So, if anyone's supporting on YouTube as a member, maybe consider moving your membership over there because, of course, for one, YouTube takes 30%, and we know that YouTube is not particularly reliable. So, just throwing that out there to make sure everyone knew for sure. It's donations and memberships. Okay, cool. I think we're going to go ahead and move over to Rockman for the last little bit, and we'll cover up some more of the specifics here. I strongly encourage you guys to do that. I think we may work into maybe we also do Rumble in the future. I don't know, but Rockfin has been really solid. They're not censoring anyone, and supposedly they have some updates to the platform coming here soon. So I encourage everyone to go over there and support us on Rockfin.
Yeah, give them time. I mean, YouTube's been around for a long time. They've had a long time to work out all their bugs and kinks, and Rockfin's in the process. They're still quite young. I know they've been around for a little bit, but yeah, give them some time. They're working on stuff, at least making improvements, and that's what we want to see. And they let us, like you said, we get to speak freely over there. It's a whole new world.
All right, cool. So we'll see you guys next week if you're not going to move over with us. That's Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern. And this has been season 10, episode 6. I encourage you guys to go over there. We'll pop off the rest of this conversation, get into some more of the details and some current events. Shout out to everyone that supported us. Thank you guys. I think we are caught up. So shout out to everyone that watched on YouTube. And again, basically the conclusion of this is that Michelson-Morley debunked heliocentrism. It's buried, swept under the rug, lied about, everyone's gaslit. Mainstream completely misrepresents it. It's been replicated since then. Heliocentrism is objectively not true. It's been literally and physically falsified with empirical measurements of mind-blowing precision, literally millions of times. It is just a fact that the Earth is not moving through space. It's been proven, and it is being denied because people literally, like the quotes we just read, can't accept the idea that the Earth is special or has a quote-unquote omnipotent position or a unique position or that everything else is moving around it. The idea that the Earth is special or unique in where it is in the universe is something that people don't like. They prefer that not to be true philosophically for whatever reason. So they ignore the empirical evidence that proved it is, in fact, in the center of the universe. Pretty crazy stuff, man. We encourage you guys to think for yourself, right? Because the weak find contentment in the consensus of ignorance. So who cares what everyone thinks? What's true is rarely popular. What's popular is rarely true. All right, love you guys. We're going to pop over to Rockfin now. So peace out to YouTube. And give me just a couple seconds to swap it over, and then we'll be back. So
love y'all.
peace out.
Peace.
Peace.